Welcome to CTO Think, a podcast about leadership, product development, and tech decisions between two recovering chief technology officers. Here are your hosts, Don Vandemark and Randy Burgess.
Hey, Randy, what's going on this week?
Hey, Don. This week, end of the year, I've moved into the house. Things are getting more in a routine, picking up, discussions with people about work in the new year. Let me think. That's pretty much been my life for the last month or so. So can't complain. Feel a little more productive than I have before. What's going on with you?
So in other words, things are getting a little bit back to normal after a move, right?
Oh, yeah, normal in the sense of when people ask me what I've been doing most days, they kind of get their eyes wide of what did you work on? I have 3 or 4 home projects and trying to figure out a Rails admin panel issue with redirection. And they're like, that none of that makes sense. But yeah, normal for me. Things are getting normal.
So on my end, just working through some things right now for Aspire EDU. We're still working on the back end, getting that split out, and continue to work on that effort so that we can address client databases a little bit more precisely. And then on the construction specialty side, just pretty much wrapping up the year, successful year. Going to have a nice get together tomorrow. So looking forward to that.
Great.
One thing that you brought to my attention, I want to say it was about 10 days ago. There was a news report about a flaw in Kubernetes that there was a flaw that allowed any user to gain full administrative privileges on a Kubernetes cluster. So
Yep.
Essentially that meant that someone could get in there, wipe all logs, and do anything. So pretty nasty flaw.
Now, wait, let's slow down 1 second. What is Kubernetes?
Yeah. Kubernetes is a container-like system, similar to Docker and that sort of thing, where it allows you to put your whole stack inside a box and run any stack you want. And this is a way to isolate. It's a way to handle virtual servers, things like that. So this flaw essentially allowed anybody to come in and be an administrator with full privileges. So that had me worried. And then as you and I have looked over the past week, that news has gone away. It's not like the flaw ever went away, but there's really been no news about it. And that's really interesting.
Yeah, there's a few interesting things about this. One, it hit the press through, I think the article I found was what's the name of that? Technarnia? You can't remember it.
Ars Technica?
Ars Technica. I've been in this business forever and I still can't remember these things. So Ars Technica posted the article. I think it was the first week of December. We're at the end of the second week, so we've been along the way. And it basically was this exploit that, in theory, you could hack it and no one would know that you hacked it. There wasn't even a trace. There wouldn't be log records because essentially the container is keeping the logs, and because it's being hacked, it's like you could walk into the house by phasing through a wall, and the security system would have no idea you passed in front of it. And so the I think I Kubernetes is backed strongly by Google.
Right.
Now, the conspiracy theorists can look into that however they want, because a lot of our news is funneling through a Google platform, AMP, search, what have you. But that really hasn't. I mean, Google has tons of bad press lately, and none of their control of the media, so to speak, or influence on the media has done anything to negate that. So it's very
Right.
hard to think that they would spend any of their own time caring about an exploit when we had Heartbleed and whatever that had logos and branding within a week. So what I don't understand, what, like, there's other factors. Is anyone using Kubernetes at the scale that they act like it is? Because if no one isn't using it, then that exploit didn't bother anybody. But I think the more likely one is that, one, the exploit was found and no one exploited it because of the way it was communicated and the way that the patches were put out. Or two, nobody knows they were hacked. And I feel like by now the chatter of who had been hacked or hackers bragging, the hacker community largely is a bunch of loudmouth folks that like to brag, or they start negotiating behind the scenes to keep things. That's the most profitable way to hack, is to hack someone and then behind the scenes negotiate a payment or something like that.
Right.
So I don't know which of these factors. The conspiracy theorist in me says that the hacks were done quietly and through backside channels. The normal side or balanced side of me says it wasn't an exploit that was hacked because the people that found it didn't have the desire to hack. They just wanted to make sure people knew about it and fixed it. Either which way, you went through a process. You had to react to it for your
Yeah.
business. So tell us what you had to do.
So before I talk about that, let's finish out the whole disclosure part of the flaw.
Yep.
From what I understand, the flaw was disclosed by a Google engineer in GitHub as an issue with an immediate close of the issue because they had solved it. So I think that's what this really is Google found it, Google fixed it, Google released that they found it and fixed it. So the flaw was there, but did anybody know it was there? Is the way I'll put it.
Yeah.
So that may be why it turned into nothing, because Google found it, they fixed it, and then they told everybody about it. So that unfortunately in the post, in the issue itself, it says there's actually no detection, as we discussed. He said it's because they have access, they can wipe the logs. You can see that they came in, but that's indistinguishable to other requests. So Red Hat reacted very, very strongly to it when it came out. Their point was, to quote from them, it's important to note that all Kubernetes-based services and products, including, and it lists all their different products, are affected. Now, that meant before the patch. That meant you've got to update to the latest release. So I think that's what happened there. So how we reacted to that, the minute you told me about it, I started digging. We use Heroku and AWS. So my initial reaction was, okay, now I got to contact Heroku, make sure they don't have Kubernetes running their services, essentially. Now, I knew that Google Kubernetes is owned by Google and managed by Google, and that AWS more uses Docker, I believe. So I had a feeling that it was okay, but anytime you have suspicion of a breach, you have to react immediately. And this wasn't even suspicious of a breach. This was suspicion of the possibility of a breach. So I reached out to Heroku support, made sure that they didn't use any Kubernetes. They actually didn't. So at that point, my investigation was done. I was able to open and close it real quick. Go ahead.
So you're using Heroku, and Heroku uses all sorts of services.
Right.
And so, and this is not an indictment at all of your use of Heroku. This is anybody. Like, if you are a company or a tech leader and you have an application or a product using Heroku, using Rackspace, any kind of managed platform, you may be using a logging system that, I don't know, like Honeybadger or whatever the heck the name is, that one. There's a ton of services out there, App Sentry, that utilize logging. This is just an example. And so you don't know what they're using. They very well may be using Kubernetes for their platform. And if they get hacked, they have access to every log that your site is sending out on an error level. Now, we all know that errors logs can usually show exploits because they're usually taking a snapshot of code to help you find out where to fix things. So ultimately, aren't you powerless to truly know how much Kubernetes is part of your system unless you've built and hosted everything yourself?
That's true. You are. That's as you said. That's true of just about everyone. Unless you build it yourself, you're kind of at the mercy of those other services. Those other services don't have access to the data necessarily. The only other thing the only other thing that would have access to data would be like a Celery or a RabbitMQ or Cloud AMQP.
Yeah.
But that's not even full data. That's just message queues. So yeah, that does exist. But for the most part, it didn't end up being an issue.
But doesn't this go to a bigger? I mean, I'm pulling this away from Kubernetes, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. This has nothing to do with you. Aren't we all sitting on kind of this big bubble of what if Amazon gets hacked? I mean, AWS is by far the biggest cloud provider on the back end right now I would say for the United States at least. And we've always heard the terms too big to fail for the banking system. And they, of course, failed back in 2008. So in the technology industry, isn't Amazon, AWS, the too big to fail scenario? Like, we're all betting on this platform not being hacked.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they use Docker or Kubernetes. It's just more of, as technology leaders, aren't we all betting on providers to be as on top of Kubernetes before we are?
Yeah, and I don't think we want to incite panic and make it sound like everybody's in trouble and everybody's vulnerable. I think it's a worthwhile discussion. Yes, the answer to your question is yes. AWS is in that position. We've seen that happen. We've seen not that happen, but we've seen indications of that, because when AWS East US goes down,
yeah,
nobody can do anything because 75% of the services out there are on AWS East. So if they were to be hacked to this degree, that everybody would be filing breach reports.
So that's part of the problem, right? Like when you have to disclose vulnerabilities as part of a compliance effort, and you can't speak for all of your service providers down to the metal they're using. Is it even realistic to think that you need to report a Kubernetes incident if you're not, if the software that you're in control of isn't under your steed?
You have a responsibility to disclose things you know of. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't sit there and whenever I fill out the security questionnaires from potential clients, a lot of my answer is this part's handled by AWS. Here's a link to their policy.
Yeah.
And to be honest, some of the time, not all the time, some of the time, that's a better answer than I'm going to give. If I didn't have AWS, I mean, let's take physical security, for example. Okay. Physical security means where is the server and how is it secured? Where is the actual metal and how is it secured?
Yeah.
Well, if I'm running it, let's take all cloud services out of the picture. Let's say I'm running it myself. That means I've got that server sitting in my house, which is going to be less secure than what Amazon has. Or somebody's provided, now somebody also may have provided some service that's not a cloud service, but is, back in the old day, you just rented metal from other people. And they would have security, but that security is going to be even less than what Amazon has. Amazon knows what they're responsible for. So everything they do is best in class, most likely. It's at least industry standard.
Yeah.
And when we're talking, and this is something I've dealt with in this role, this is something I've dealt with when I was at IBM. Industry standard becomes that term you lean on in contracts, because we'd have clients ask for best in class. And we'd say, no, that's not what you really don't want best in class. Because if you want best in class, we're going to charge you best in class prices.
Yeah.
What you want is you want industry standard. You want what everybody else is doing, because it's social proof, essentially. If all of the top providers are doing something one way, then that is the standard this industry is going to go forward with. And there's a couple things there, right? One is that it just works. Two is that you're likely not to find much better out there.
Yeah. Do you want me to deliver the analogy from a different industry?
Yeah.
So I worked in the finance industry for 10 years as working in tech for the finance. And the business that we had was essentially, we took a bunch of different companies' money and transparently put it in one account, and then we commingled it by design. SEC knows about it. Our clients knew about it. And then we would track that money separately so that, in theory, we weren't taking money from company A to pay off company B. Like, there was no way that we did that. And it worked. But there's also another company that did that, but they didn't do it transparently. That was Bernie Madoff. Right. And Madoff, which most people know about, I'll briefly just say, he had a Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme. He basically took money from company A in the 70s, and he was paying them returns based on the money that company Z was giving him 2 decades later. And the thing is that everyone was giving Madoff money in the family office community because of the same thing you said, best practices. Everyone's doing it. He's doing the best. Not only that, Bernie Madoff was on the regulation committees around the people policing his businesses and stuff. And so so if you're a family office, you're telling people, clients, we're going to put your money with Madoff's company because that's best practice in our industry. And if you follow this link, you'll see their policies, so to speak. And you know that they're legit because he's on the governing body. So I'm not trying to say that that is happening with Amazon or with these other services. And I'm not trying to freak people out. I'm trying to say that assumptions of best in class, if you abstract it that easily, you're probably missing something.
But you can't. I'm going to go and say you cannot run a business assuming criminal behavior by everyone else.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Okay. Yes, if Amazon was running criminally and selling our data, even though they said they wouldn't, and hacking into our systems, that would be a problem. There's also not a darn thing that people really can do about it except not use it. Until there's a whistleblower, nobody would know. So it's...
So Andy Grove of Intel used to have a saying, only the paranoid survive. That might have been his book title.
Sure.
And I don't agree with that. The paranoid typically go insane. But I do think that you should have, as a technical leader, a healthy amount of skepticism about things that are delivered to you as this is what everybody does.
Agreed, but again, I'll use your own analogy to shoot that down. Let's say I'm told that Bernie Madoff's company is the one to use. That's who everybody uses. I'm not sure what skepticism was going to do for me to find out that he was the wrong one to give money to. Because
his returns were so far away from anyone else in the industry.
Okay, but that's like saying don't use Amazon because they have the fastest servers and the most reasonable prices.
But Amazon isn't. They have competitors that are really close to them. That's my point.
Then why is AWS running the vast majority of the business?
Well, because of time, they've been out there longer. But understand, I'm not saying AWS is Bernie Madoff. I'm saying that you should be skeptical enough to not blanketly just choose services based on, well, that's what everyone uses, therefore it's safe. We're talking about security. We're talking about a scenario where an exploit was found. And I'm saying that you have to be skeptical enough to not make choices where you just wave your hand and don't care to check in the things at some level. You did so. I bet you Heroku got like nobody asking them, do you use Kubernetes? But you did take the time because there was enough skepticism of maybe I should ask. And I'm saying that's prudent. I'm not saying, I don't think you need to do anything else. I don't think you should stop using Heroku. I'm just saying that in your role as a leader of building services that are dependent upon other services, it is upon you to be skeptical enough to check into things. I did the same thing. I was the only person that went, there was a company in Louisville that did co-location hosting for websites. And we were only spending like $1,000 a month at the time for this same financial firm. And I flew to Louisville for a day to go and look at the co-location facility of two places. One of those places had everything done correctly. They looked
Right.
legit. The other one, they had literally a different company above their servers with plumbing above their servers. Like
Yeah.
their bathroom, one of their bathroom stacks, plumbing stacks, was above a rack of servers below the company that we would, in theory, be hosting with. And I was like, hell no. There's no way in heck I'm going to put my servers in a co-location facility that allows plumbing to be above their servers, like that allows a pipe with water to be above them. Because it doesn't matter how good the plumbers are. There's so many flaws in a plumbing system that can cause a leak. And so that diligence was a day. And they said, you're the only person that's ever visited our server, our system like this. And this is back in 2005, maybe?
Right.
And it was the deciding choice. Now, do I think that Amazon is dumb enough to do that? No. But I'm just saying that if you, in your role of technology, skepticism is worthwhile. Paranoia is not, but skepticism of the companies that you are that are providing you services is part of your diligence that I think is worthwhile.
Skepticism is, but again, Amazon's not going to let you go tour their servers.
No.
So how would you implement that if you were to be skeptical of Amazon?
Then that's where you, like the link you talked about here, their policies. Read them.
Sure. Yeah. No. Yeah. If that's the level of skepticism you're saying, which is don't accept that they have policies, actually go read the policies.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that.
The mortgage company that I got our home loan with was like, wow, you read everything. And I'm like, well, it's not that long of a document, but yeah, I want to know what I'm signing. That's important stuff. If Amazon has a 1-page document that says, if we F up everything, you have no recourse, I'm pulling everything from Amazon that day. If Amazon says, if we have a problem, you have to go to arbitration, I'm going to be like, okay, that's standard. If Amazon says, at no point is data security a part of what we do for you, okay, I'm out. Like I cannot put my company's servers there. So Amazon is maybe a bad example, but Bernie Madoff was promising the same thing. And he was a big player. The amount of holdings he had relative to any other investment house was like, with the lack of controls and accounting, was amazing.
Right.
And that was an industry that was fully automated on so many levels. And he used this backdoor of trust to skirt all of those things that everyone else was kind of like. The fraud going on at Wells Fargo is still shocking to me that it got that far, because there's so many automated processes in place that in theory should stop it. So we're picking on Amazon because they're a big player, but there's lots of co-location and cloud services that are popping up now. Like, I don't know, I'm not hosting anything important with Netlify, and I love their service. I think it's a terrific product. I don't know jack about them. I'm hosting I'm hosting HTML files there with zero data collection. So do I care a ton? Right. Nah. But if I'm going to put a product that allows customers to put data through servers on their side at all, I got to do more diligence than sign up for Netlify and click a terms of service checkbox. It's on me, the tech leader, to be more skeptical of Netlify than what I'm doing for my own website at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. So that's actually a good warning. Is somebody's got to be reading those documents. Somebody's got to be doing that checking. And because the lawyers aren't, unless you direct the lawyers to do it, the lawyers aren't doing it.
Yeah.
And as a technology leader, that is your role. And that is the role I serve for Aspire EDU is when the security documents come in from clients and they need to be answered, I go over them and I re-answer them every time. And I phrased it that way, meaning I don't have something I cut and paste from. I go and I will go and review previous questionnaires and move some answers over, but not before I read through it and go, is that still true? Because things are shifting all the time in what we're doing. So there's no pat answer I give back to our clients when we're asked for answers on security. And then things like GDPR coming from Europe and California just implemented their own privacy regulations, which are not as stringent as GDPR, but they are, you know what, to do business in California, you have to look at it. So, and that's only going to become more the case. There's only going to, more states are going to start to get involved in that. So, knowing the regulations, knowing where the services you use fit in all those, and knowing where the services you provide fit in all those, is a very important part of the job.
I mean, there's some argument to be made on those documents. Like when companies go into a contract with another company on a sales level, typically at a certain amount of scale, you have an attorney that reviews the contract between the parties, or at least on each side, the parties both have attorneys, right? If you're a tech company, depending on services, there's nothing to be said that you, the CTO, needs to be the one that reviews it. Like skepticism, I guess the point I want to make here is that skepticism doesn't have to be completely managed with your own time as a tech leader. So I didn't have to travel to Louisville. There are companies that go out and do due diligence for you on services and stuff. There's all sorts of industries where compliance is part of a service that you farm out to other places. Food industry is one where my dad did that for companies. So I guess the point I want to make is if you have a contract between you and another service provider and you feel like, hey, we need to be diligent about this, we need to be skeptical of this, you don't have to read that document yourself. You need perhaps a professional that can say, here are the risky points of this contract you may want to consider. And then you're aware of it. Your skepticism is at least has knowledge of the points of risk. And then you can weigh whether that's a big deal. And if the person that does the reading for you says, this is a crappy contract that was boilerplate that they copy and pasted that I could find on the internet in 5 minutes, that tells you something bigger about the company. But if they say, man, they cover their bases, you have recourse for failures through this means, and that's pretty standard, then maybe your skepticism is fine, and it's fine to check. But I don't think, I don't want to try to tell tech leaders that amongst all the chores you have, it's only on you to read that stuff. It may not be your job specifically to conduct the due diligence. It may be on you to tell your company, we need to look at the due diligence on this, and then they find the professional that should do it for you.
And you need to make sure that it happens, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Whether you're the one that does it, you need to make sure it happens, and
Yep.
and that's absolutely the case. When you've got smaller companies, you don't have necessarily those resources to the financial resources to have somebody else do it.
Sure.
So sometimes it does fall upon you and you make your best efforts at it. And by the way, that doesn't mean that if you find something you don't know, you just go, oh, it's probably not important. That means if you find something you don't know, you dig, or that's where you go get help, because that's a little bit more limited scope that you need help on, as opposed to a whole document.
Yeah. But you could also argue, you could say, I mean, it could be as simple as you go to your boss and you say, hey, we're doing 70% of our technology hosting with AWS or Google Cloud. And there are terms of service agreements for all of these things that I don't have the time based on all of the things we're doing that I can review. So what do you've basically elevated it, the knowledge of the risk, contractual risk, to the higher ups and said, should this be part of my current responsibilities? Or is this something that you want, that is important to you? We can have someone else do, And it's really on the person at the top to make some choice in that. Now, they may very well push it back to you, and then you can have to do the typical, I've only got so many hours in the day to get everything done. What do you want me to focus on? But it's still, I guess I'm saying that the people that don't know technology are also looking at you as a tech leader to tell them where the points of risk are. And then if it's legal, you can say, I'm not an attorney. Or if there's holes in the contract, you say, we're using this service, it's economical. Here are the risk points in using that service. Or here's what I don't know. I don't know if they use Kubernetes. And that's still fine. Because at this point, we don't know that Kubernetes is a risk. But it's still part of the pipeline. I mean, I feel like the industry, when I talk to other CTOs, whenever we hear about like Heartbleed and stuff, no one waves their hand like, I don't care about it. I think there's a deep-seated fear of, it's impossible for me to know, and I'm just not going to talk about it too much. And that's natural. I don't think it's I think it's a normal thing of like, there are so many things that I have control over that I'm working on right now that if Amazon, I think going back to your point of like 70% of people are on the North Virginia AWS server. It's like when that goes down, what's the first thing you think about when AWS has a blip? Well, it's not just me.
Absolutely true, right?
So, like, who's gonna kick me in the teeth over this when GitHub is down, when S3 is down? Like, what else can I depend on? I mean, remember even Amazon's own status images were hosted on itself, and so its status was depending on itself to not go down. So when the Amazon status light alerts aren't working, how the heck can mine? There's something to be said as a small business that you have to make those bets. And then when you get to a certain scale, those bets are too costly. You start to change how you do it. So at any point in our conversation, have I changed my mind about would I use Kubernetes? Would I use Amazon or Red Hat? Would I use Google Cloud? The answer is no. I'm still going to use all those services. Have I read the AWS terms of service? Heck no. Like, none of these things are me saying I read all these documents and think you should. I guess what I'm saying is you should. I am skeptical of them. I just have to make my choices about what that skepticism drives me to do.
Right. And that's there's a famous quote, and I'm struggling to remember it. Something about it's something to the effect of, we can only do so much in the face of criminal behavior, right? Yeah. We can't outthink the criminals. We can only do our best. and we rely on other things for that criminal behavior. But so I think that pretty much covers the thought process that we went through as we were trying to determine what I was going to do in response to this Kubernetes flaw. I made sure all our developers knew about it, so we discussed it. I actually did not even raise it to the level of the CEO.
Yeah.
Because after investigating it, it did not affect us.
Yeah.
My only thought was maybe I'll send her a note just in case somebody comes back and says, "Are you affected by that?" She had an easy answer. Well, honestly, what I was waiting for there, I was waiting for the news to get bigger.
Yeah.
The news never got bigger. Therefore, I'm almost positive none of our clients even know that flaw exists. So it didn't even matter.
Do you think the news didn't get big because George Soros is behind it, or the deep state?
Why is that an either or question? Why can't that say both?
Isn't it the same thing? I don't know. That's a whole other episode on our new podcast, Tinfoil Management. Tinfoil Hat Management. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that what you just said there, like, is it your responsibility to bring every alert to your CEO? And the answer is no. Like, your CEO most likely is hiring you to be that filter. Right. Bring me the important stuff. You reached out to Heroku. You asked your main hosting provider, are you using this service that I just read has a major security exploit? They replied no. If you're working for me and you gave me that you did that diligence, I'd be like, okay, that sounds like what I'd want you to ask. And does that mean that another provider on, like, if you're using Honeybadger and they, in theory, used a service that got hacked, is that on you? It's like, I understand in this environment that you can't be that skeptical of everybody. But I feel like in this case you did. And then what did you do? You waited to see what happened with the exploit. Right. And obviously at this point, either nothing happened or it wasn't of significant news, because Heartbleed didn't even cost a bunch of people money and that got better coverage. So, I mean, I feel like the skepticism, the diligence you put into it for this particular instance warranted, like you met that based on what I can tell.
Right. And I was perfectly comfortable with where we were. It did make me go, it's one of those things that it made me go back over, okay, what happens if I find that Heroku, it made me go down that trail. What happens if I find out that Heroku uses Kubernetes? What are my next steps? Okay, my next steps are to do further investigation to find out how everybody else is reacting to this. And that would have led me to, it was announced, patched, and I'm sorry, it was found, patched, and then announced. So that would have led me to seeing what the rest of the industry was doing. And the rest of the industry, essentially through silence, was telling me nobody was exposed. Yeah. Or nobody thought they were exposed. So it's not for me to go out there and say, incite panic by saying, this flaw exists. We have no proof that we were breached, but we have no proof that we weren't. Therefore, we're just telling you we might have been, because that's not our responsibility either. Our contractual responsibilities are upon discovery of a breach. It's not upon discovery of maybe. Yeah, that's our job, is if there's a maybe, to go investigate and find out further. So so that it's just part of the job. So I'm glad it turned out okay. Though there will be more instances like this, and it just have to react to each one as they come, and that turns that process and how we react to that into more of a documented process. If I'll write it down each time, as far as, okay, what steps did I take?
Yeah.
That becomes even better. So that's pretty much it for this discussion. What else did you have?
That's pretty much all I got. I don't use Docker or Kubernetes right now, so neither one worried me a ton.
Right.
But I use Heroku. So when you decided to write Heroku, I was waiting for your answer. I was like, if they are using this and this gets bigger, this could be a huge, but it wasn't a big deal in that case.
But I could have been lying to you as well. So you did not verify that I wasn't lying to you.
Are you the Bernie Madoff of my life? Do I need to get back that $10,000 you said you were investing for me?
What $10,000? I didn't.
That's exactly what I thought. Oh man.
All right.
No,
so very good. Yep. I think we've hit it. And then I guess we'll talk again. Now I believe we have recaps coming up for the end of the year, correct?
Yes. Well, we have in our other episode on This Old App, we are going to talk with Mark Thompson, who we spoke to. He was using Dart and Flutter as an alpha user, and I guess Flutter is now 1.0. So we're going to follow up with him on his year 2018 with Flutter, and then I don't know, maybe we'll go over for the last CTO Think of the year. We should probably kind of look back on the year of, this is our first year of doing the podcast. Maybe we can look over our episodes and just talk about anything that came of those or something like that. So yeah, we can do a recap. That sounds good.
Yeah. I think the idea there is, hey, we've talked about all these things. We may not have talked about something that we talked about back in March, but things may have changed.
Yeah.
So we'll do a catch up episode, make sure we're all on the same page, and we'll launch into 2019.
And we'll talk about whatever the last 2 weeks is going to replace React. I said that for two reasons. One, we need React to be said in an episode for the cha-ching. And there's no doubt there's a new framework out there that is beating React at the moment. And I guarantee it's happened. So, yeah, that's why I mentioned that.
Yep, for sure.
All right, man.
Cha-ching.
We will
all right,
talk to you
very
next
good.
week.
See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the CTO Think podcast. Show notes and previous episodes can be found on our website at ctothink.com. Reviews on Apple iTunes are always appreciated and help promote the show. Patreon contributions help us to produce episode transcripts, which allow people that are deaf or hard of hearing to access the show. If you have feedback, ideas, or want to be a guest, please email us at hello@ctothink.com. Show music is Dumpster Dive by Mark Wallach, licensed by premiumbeat.com. Voiceover work by meganvoices.com. You'll hear from us next week.